Hello and welcome. We're about to dive deep into one of the most critical moments in India's journey to independence. In the final, chaotic years of the British Raj, one last-ditch effort was made to hold the country together. Today, we are unpacking the Wavell Plan and the Simla Conference of 1945, a high-stakes negotiation that really stood between a united subcontinent and the violent partition that was just around the corner. And this is the huge question we're going to explore today. Was there a moment, a final opportunity, to forge a path for a single, independent India before the divisions just became too deep to bridge? Let's find out. So here's our roadmap. First, we'll set the stage and look at the political deadlock right after the war. Then we'll get into the specifics of the Wavell Plan itself. After that, we'll head to the showdown at Simla. We'll analyze the two opposing positions that led to its failure, and then, and this is crucial, we'll look at the lasting legacy of it all. Okay, let's get right into it. To really get the Wavell Plan, you have to picture India in 1945. World War II is winding down, but on the subcontinent, a political fire is absolutely simmering, and the British are fast running out of time to keep the lid on it. You see, after the Quit India movement, things were at a total stalemate. Most of the top leaders from the Indian National Congress were in prison, which created this big political vacuum. But as the war drew to a close, Britain was in a tough spot. They were weakened by the war, they were facing international pressure, and they knew holding India by force just wasn't an option anymore. They had to re-engage, and fast, to prevent what they called an explosive post-war situation. So they released the Congress leaders from jail to try and start a new dialogue. This quote from Lord Wavell himself, it just lays out the British strategy perfectly. His thinking was crystal clear. We need to get these Indian leaders to stop protesting and start governing. He wanted to shift their focus away from the big emotional demand for independence and onto the practical, day-to-day problems of running the country. The hope was, this would cool things down and maybe create a more cooperative vibe. So with that as the backdrop, what was the actual plan that Lord Wavell put on the table? Let's take a look at this new formula, this thing that was designed to finally break the deadlock and find a path forward. All right, the plan basically had three core parts. First, a really big step towards self-rule. The Viceroy's Executive Council, the main governing body, would become almost entirely Indian. The only Brits left would be the Viceroy himself and the Commander-in-Chief. Second, and this is the really controversial part, it proposed parity, an equal number of seats for Caste Hindus and for Muslims. Now this was a huge deal, because Muslims were a minority of the population. And third, this new council would act as an interim government, kind of like a trial run for self-governance until a whole new constitution could be written. But, and this is a big but, the plan raised a lot of red flags right away. For one, the whole idea of reserving seats based on religion and caste was a major sticking point. But even more than that, it was a plan about the process, not the final destination. There was no concrete promise of independence, no mention of a group to write a new constitution, and no clear roadmap for how power would ultimately be divided. It really felt like a temporary band-aid for a permanent problem. So, with the plan on the table, the stage was set for this massive political summit in the summer capital of Simla. And this is where the theory of the Wavell Plan was about to collide with the hard, messy reality of Indian politics. Imagine the scene. 21 of India's most powerful political leaders were invited to the Viceroy Lodge. I mean, everybody who was anybody was there. The Indian National Congress, the Muslim League, representatives of other communities. The air must have been thick with tension and anticipation. This really felt like a moment where the future of India could be decided. And almost immediately, the conference just hit a brick wall. The two biggest players, the Congress and the Muslim League, came to the table with completely opposing visions, not just for the plan, but for their own identities and for the very future of India itself. This slide lays out the core conflict perfectly. On one side, you have the Congress, arguing that it represents all Indians, from all communities. So they insisted on their right to nominate anyone, including their own president at the time, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, who was a Muslim. But on the other side, you had the Muslim League, which demanded that it, and only it, had the right to nominate all the Muslim members to the council. You see, for the Congress, giving in to the League's demand was just impossible. It would mean abandoning its entire identity as a secular, nationalist movement. If they agreed they couldn't nominate a Muslim to the council, they would basically be accepting the label of a caste Hindu party, something they completely rejected. And this quote shows the League's absolute deal-breaker. For them, this was all about being recognized as the one and only voice for the Muslim community. Anything less was a threat to their political power. And on top of that, they also wanted a communal veto, which would let them block any decision in the council that didn't have a two-thirds majority.
So you've got two sides dug into positions they absolutely could not abandon. The whole conference was teetering on the brink of collapse. Let's look at exactly how it all fell apart.
Now here's the part that shocked a lot of people. Lord Wavell didn't really try to forge a compromise. He didn't push back against the League or try to move forward with Congress and the other groups. Instead, he just declared the whole thing a failure. He abandoned his own plan and dissolved the conference. Just over.
Okay, so the conference fails. What's the big deal? Well, this is where it gets incredibly important. The collapse at Simla wasn't just some failed meeting. It had massive, long-lasting consequences that would echo all the way to the partition of India just 2 years later.
Think about it. By dissolving the conference specifically because the League wouldn't budge, Wavell basically handed them a huge political victory. His action was seen as an official validation of their claim to be the sole voice for Muslims. It gave them a de facto veto over any future plans. The divide between the parties just got deeper, trust was shattered, and the failure set a really bitter precedent for all the negotiations that were still to come.
And that is the ultimate tragedy of the Wavell Plan. It was an honest attempt to bridge a political gap, to channel all this energy towards cooperation, but in its failure, it ended up digging the trench even deeper, making the communal divide wider and, in a way, more official than it had ever been before.
And this brings us right back to that huge question we started with. The Simla Conference was probably the last real shot at creating a power-sharing deal for a united India with everyone on board. When it failed, and when the British Viceroy essentially backed the idea of a communal veto, was the path to partition set in stone? That's the heavy question this moment in history really forces us to confront.